This is a Renew original recording. Hello and welcome to Believe in People, a British podcast award-winning series about all things addiction, recovery and stigma. My name is Matthew Butler and I'm your host, or as I like to say, your facilitator. Today's guest is Tom Fitzsimons, an ultramarathon runner who achieved the extraordinary feat of running 3,073 miles across the United States in just 100 days. But this story is much more than physical endurance. It's a testament to resilience, recovery and transformation. Tom's journey from battling addiction to conquering some of the world's toughest endurance challenges highlights the profound impact of determination and personal growth. Along the way, he used his experiences to challenge stigma, inspire change, and reshape how we think about addiction and recovery. I begin our conversation by asking Tom about the moment he realised running could help him break free from addiction and change his life.
Running was the only option I had in my early days recovery. So 2007, alcohol services weren't the best back then. I went to my doctor and asked for some help. I had a problem with alcohol for a long, long time. And he looked at me and laughed. He went, "Don't be stupid, Tom, you're Irish. It's just what you do." So we I decided to do what I tell everyone not to do. I went cold turkey. And somebody had mentioned to me that this thing called running might help with my addiction. You know, it helps with depression, it helps with anxiety. And apparently it would help with my addiction. And I was like 21 stone at the time. There's no way I could run. Not, you know what I mean? Not a chance now. So I went out and ran half an hour, half a mile. It was absolutely rubbish. Came back home, vomited all over the bathroom and swore I'd never go running again. But something changed that night. It was something that I didn't realise how powerful it was going to be. I got a sudden feeling inside my stomach, and I hadn't had that feeling for a long, long time. And that feeling was what I now know as happiness. And that was going to allow me to run the next day and then the next day. And within 6 weeks, I'd run a 10K. 3 months to run a half marathon. And I thought, you know what, this is it. I've cracked it. None of this Alcoholics Anonymous for me. I didn't have to go stop drinking. All I had to do was run. So run 6 miles, drink 6 pints, run 8 miles, 8 pints, half marathon, happy days. And finally realised that I couldn't do both. I had to stop completely. Go through it all again, the cold turkey, the pee, the poo, the vomit, the shakes, the shivers, the sweats. And get to a point where running became my vehicle for change. And that was 2007, 2008. Started to think about marathons and did a couple of marathons. And people were impressed. People liked it. And I thought to myself, do you know what? Well, maybe I can change perceptions, people's perceptions of who I am as a person. Because I was always known as Tom, the guy who likes a drink. And then all of a sudden I was starting to be Tom the runner. So my identity was changing. And I think to myself, well, if I can change my identity just by running, then we can change perceptions of what people like me are, the perceptions of an alcoholic. What does an alcoholic look like? So I started running further and further and heard about these fantastic things called ultramarathons. I was like, you know, what are you talking about? An ultramarathon? I thought a marathon was as far as you could go. But there's this group of crazy people who run further than 26.2 miles. They run 30 miles, they run 35 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles, some of them even 100 miles in a day. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I could do this. Maybe that would get more people to buy into what we're capable of. And I saw there was a race. It was a race across the Sahara Desert called the Marathon des Sables. And it's classed as the toughest foot race on earth, 155 miles through the Sahara Desert, carrying your own backpack. And I signed up for it. And people were like, you can't do this, Tom. You've only been running for 3 years. You know, this is something you build a lifetime to. I didn't have a lifetime. I'd wasted a lifetime. I'd wasted an entire lifetime. So I knew I didn't have that amount of time to practice and train So I signed up for it, and people laughed. And I eventually, they laughed at me as I'm training up and down the streets of Wakefield for the hottest desert in the world, in the worst winter we'd ever had back in 2009, 2010. I managed to get to a point where I felt comfortable and confident about doing the race. And I arrived on the start in April 2010. Before that, I was Tom Fitzsimons, the drunk, the domestic abuser, the drink driver, the waste of a life. And 7 days later, on 155 miles further through the desert, I was Tom Fitzsimons, the finisher of the toughest foot race on earth. Now, for me, that was the pinnacle of what life was going to be like. And I was quite happy with that being that pinnacle of success for me. But I didn't want to be one of those people that was walking around saying to young students, because I was speaking in schools at that stage, you've got great potential. When I hadn't fulfilled my own. I knew there was something else. There was another part of me that could do more, be more, achieve more. And I was watching Red Bull Stratos, a lad called Felix Baumgartner, who was jumping out of a balloon. I don't know if you remember this one, the Red Bull Stratos. He jumped out of a balloon from the edge of space. And as he got to the edge of space, he looked out from the capsule. He says, sometimes you have to come up really high to see how small you are. Well, I already knew how small I was. I'd always been small. But it sparked something in me to go, I don't want to be small anymore. I want to do something spectacular. It was in that moment that I thought, well, do you know what? I can run across the United States of America, do a Forrest Gump, get out there and do something spectacular. Show people that I'm not small. Show people if you take your opportunities, you can achieve anything. And that was really the first point in which I thought about running across the United States of America. So that was where I say we, it's the royal way, it's my family. That's where we started to come up with a plan. Okay, it's okay saying this, but how do you actually do it? How do you actually plan to run across the United States of America? And that's where the fun began. For me, it was, again, when you start talking about these things, you start thinking, right, I need sponsors, I need finance, I need to try and organise things. And I need to tell my wife that I'm thinking about doing this. Now, that's a conversation in itself, It's okay saying you're going to run across the Sahara Desert. And that was met with a little bit of, eyes rolled to the back of their head. But when you're going to run across a continent, that's a different conversation. That's a difficult one to broach. But as with everything I do, and this is really important for people out there who are trying to navigate their way through any addiction. For me, my partner didn't judge. Zoe doesn't judge. Everybody needs a Zoe in their life. She listened. She put a very practical spin on it. How are we going to pay for it? When are you going to do it? But she never once said no. I've been told no all my life. And Zoe never says no. She supports everything I do. So for me, that was the go-ahead. Go and find a sponsor. Go and find a way to do this. Figure out how you're going to get to a point where you can actually stand on the start line of the Marathon des Sables, of America, and run across the continent. So the sponsorship was just, how do you find a sponsor to run across America? Because
if you go to someone and tell them this is your plan, like how many people are actually going to take that?
Yeah.
Take that seriously.
Exactly. And I think, so for me, I'd spoken at a conference in Berlin for a big company. And the managing director came up to me at the end of the conference and he says, He gave me his business card. He says, if there's ever anything you need, give me a call or send me an email. Now, I don't know if you've ever had that from somebody, and you know they've no intention of helping you.
Yeah.
You know that's never the actual intention.
Just think they're full of shit and just trying to, yeah.
Their intention is to make themselves look good for a minute and make you feel good about yourself. Like you've done a really good job at the conference.
Yeah.
And then you put the card in your pocket and you forget about the card and it's done. Mm. Well, he was at the time, he was probably the most influential person I knew. The person who had access to funds and had done loads of other stuff that I thought, I'm going to send him an email. And I don't name this guy at all. I don't name the company because they wanted it completely anonymously. And I sent him an email expecting, to hear nothing back. My name's Tom. We met at a conference in Berlin. You said if I needed anything, well, I'd like to run across the United States of America. Sent the email. Expecting never to hear back from him. And that was on the Saturday. And he emailed me back on the Monday morning. In principle, Tom, we're on. We're going to get this done. So that's when the butterflies start coming in. Somebody's called you bluff here, Tom.
Yeah. You're going to have to do it now.
Right, somebody's called you bluff. And as an addict, I've always been a bullshitter. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Then somebody actually says to you, I believe you can. I'd never had that. Apart from my wife, I'd never had somebody else backing me. Somebody else saying, you're good enough to do this. My entire life had been a complete shambles of people, of me trying to do things and be something. And, my career in the construction industry, utility industry was all about trying to be something better, trying to, climb the corporate ladder. And even though I was an alcoholic, I still climbed that corporate ladder. But people really didn't believe that I could do what I said I could do. So to have this sponsor sitting by and going, okay, Tom, we're on, we can do this. We can give you a pot of money. We can get this sorted. So then the next thing is, when are you going to do it? It's okay saying you're going to do it, but how long does it take to train for a run across the United States of America? Most people will go 2 or 3 years' time. And like I said earlier on, I'd wasted a lifetime. I didn't have that time. So this was October, and I planned it 6 months. I gave myself 6 months of preparation to run 3,100 miles across the continent, which, with hindsight, when I'm looking back on it now, I'm thinking to myself, what were you thinking? Anybody who's in recovery will probably say, and I don't know if you agree with this, but we tend to be chasing missed opportunities. We tend to be trying to grab back time. We've wasted so much time. I'd wasted 20 years of my life. I had my first drink at 13 years of age. And from 13 to 33, I destroyed myself. So I didn't have the time. I felt I didn't have the time. Again, with hindsight, I look back and go, yeah, you did have the time, Tom. But I'm pleased I didn't wait. Because what you find with people who wait, they find excuses. They find reasons not to. They find injuries. They find family life gets in the way. How many people have you heard in recovery have gone, I'm not ready yet. Now's not the time. I have to wait for the stars to align and everything to be perfect alignment. The planets have to be right. Everything. The weather has to be right. Every excuse under the sun to not do something. And I didn't have the time for that anymore. I was so impatient with and frustrated with myself with how many wasted chances I'd had. So I gave myself 6 months and started to put the hammer down and trying to get myself into a position where I could actually do this thing.
And what was the training for that like then? How does that look practically? I mean, is it X amount of miles per day? Where do you even start?
So for me, I used the old adage of my drinking days. So my drinking days was not how many pints I could drink in a day. It was how many days I could do it for.
Okay.
And that was the way my mind worked.
Wow.
And I transferred that into my running. It wasn't how many miles I could do in a day. It's how many days I could do it for. And it was a more positive way of having that mindset. So for the training, I was already fit to 2010, did the Marathon des Sables, kept on running after the MDS, few marathons. I was doing about 10 or 11 marathons a year, every year from my recovery. I
just wanted, because the thing is, some people run a marathon and that's their crowning achievement of their life is they ran a marathon. And you're saying you've done 10 to 11 a year.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing. Do you know, it's just another weekend for you. Do you know, a monthly activity that you partake in.
Yeah, it was becoming...
That's incredible.
It became that sort of a mindset of I had so much time to catch up on. I tried to squeeze 20 years of youth into as quick a space as I could. Yeah. Now that would backfire on me later on because of my knees and things like that. But I tried to make sure that I didn't want people to think I was just going to be a one-trick pony. Didn't want people to go, oh yeah, here we go. You said you were going to become a runner and you didn't. You did one marathon and that was it. And I always remember I went to a talk, a guy called Simon Hartley, who is a sports psychologist, and he was talking to a guy who wrote a book about the All Blacks. And the All Blacks says the worst type of All Black is having one cap. Yeah. Nobody wants to be that All Black that only gets one cap. Yeah. You know what I mean? That means you've represented the All Blacks and they didn't like you. Or you didn't do what you said you were going to do. Or you didn't do what you say you were going to do. And for me, that was something I kept in the back of my head all the time. I wanted to keep on pushing. I wanted to catch that time up. So yeah, I was doing regular marathons. I was out towards the marathon, the Marathon des Sables. I was doing a 10K in front of the fire on a morning to try and get some heat training. I couldn't afford Tenerife. And then 15, 16 miles on a night time. So that was the training for the MDS. For the run across America, I realised quite quickly there was no way I could replicate the amount of mileage I was going to have to do without getting injured. So I was doing about 150 miles a week, which when you break that down, that's a lot of mileage every week. But when I was going to America, it was going to be 210 miles a week. Every week. It's
a big difference.
So there is.
It might not sound like much, but it is a big difference, that isn't it?
Yeah. So I took a different stance on it. I said, right, okay, I'm gonna get myself into a position where I can comfortably run 150 miles a week, and make sure that by the time I get to America, use the first 2 or 3 weeks to run into the race or run into the run, get myself fitter as I got there. But 150 miles a week takes some doing. Then you've got other things to think about. You've had the planning of the race or the run, the planning of how we're going to pay my mortgage. A lot of people do these challenges. There's a lot of people out there doing challenges, celebrity challenges.
Don't need to worry about all that
stuff. They don't have to worry about paying their mortgage. They don't have to worry about paying for hotels or anything like that. They literally have to just go and run, or go and cycle. And they've got a sports masseuse, they've got hotels paid for, everything's sorted out, the communications are all done, everything's done.
Separated from reality, a lot of them. I saw an interview recently with Mariah Carey, and they're talking about electricity. She didn't know people paid for electricity.
Well, there you
Do you know what I mean? The disparities between your life and ours is just...
It's huge.
Yeah.
It is huge. And I think when you look at these challenges that people do, and there are some really famous people doing some really great work, raising lots of money for charity, but... The hard part for me wasn't the running, it was the actual organising. It was working with my wife to make sure we had a route planned, make sure we had enough food, make sure we had a car available, make sure the flights were booked, doing everything at the wrong set. But then also when I was away, making sure that my partner wasn't going to lose the house. So all those things had to be planned for. So the running, I got to about 150 miles away, and then I had to back off a little bit. I thought, right, there's things going wrong here. My knee was sore.
I was going to say, where's the recovery time?
There wasn't any.
Exactly.
There wasn't any recovery
And it's so important, isn't it?
So for me, the knee went, and a torn cartilage in my knee. had no chance of getting surgery before I went. Again, if you're a celebrity, straight into a private doctor, cuts out, does an arthroscopy, you're back on the road in 6 to 8 weeks. There was no time for that. The NHS don't work that way.
Of course, yeah.
So I had to just get a cortisone injection in my knee and accept that I was going to have to run 3,100 miles in a little bit of pain.
Just a little bit.
A little bit of pain. But here's the thing. Running across America in a little bit of pain is it's not as bad as living in pain that I was in my head when it came to my addiction. You know, waking up every day not knowing whether you're going to be able to survive the day without destroying yourself. And I think when people talk about pain, the life of an addict is the most, in my opinion, is the most painful thing you'll ever go through. But I don't think you know you're in pain until you come out of it. You know, I think that's the thing. You don't know you're in pain. You don't realise that there's that much chaos in your life until you step away from it. Yeah. When I look back on it, knee pain was the least of my worries. You know, that to me was something that was, I wore it almost as a badge of honour. You know, pain in my knee was going to remind me that, do you know what, Tom, you're doing this for the right reasons. You're doing this for those who can't. You're doing this for the guy who's still laying on his sofa, obliterated in drink. You're doing it for the heroin addict on the street. You're doing it for the person who's smoking crack, can't get through the day. You're doing it for the person who's been wounded as a child. And for me, that was so important to remember why I was doing it.
We talk a lot about the addict's mentality, and it's something that can be said to people who are still in addiction, that if you put that addict's mentality to good use, you'd achieve great things. And I think what I'm kind of seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of being addicted to alcohol, it's almost like, you know, people say cross addiction as a very negative thing, but it's almost like you became addicted to running. Would you agree with that at all? Did that become like the vice that you replaced alcohol with?
No, it's always a conversation that comes up. It's a valid conversation. And the way I always answer this is running was constructive.
Yeah.
It rebuilt my life. Addiction is destructive. You know, when you're addicted to something, and if we take the purest form of the word addiction, it usually destroys your life. There's very few people who are addicted to something where it constructs. So for me, it was constructing my life. There was elements of it that probably were on the verges of addiction, like running through knee pain. But I had a reason for that. And that was it was almost my penance for 20 years of addiction. You're going to suffer a little bit as well, Tom. It's no good if it's easy. You know what I mean? If you're going into this and it's going to be easy. So the argument about it being an addiction, for me, I always said, I can see where that comes from. But for me, it was constructive. It remained constructive for a long period of time. And when it stopped being constructive, I stopped it. And I think that was the thing. It was fairly easy to stop. Yeah. It wasn't something I would continue to do.
Yeah. What about the now mentality, in the sense of that's one thing that we sometimes see is within an addict, it needs to happen now. You're saying that something that should have taken a lifetime to achieve, you did you trained for 6 months. Yeah. Would you agree that now mentality was a positive in your training?
100%. Yeah. I mean, for me, and I understand people who have that now mentality, because there are so many wasted opportunities throughout your addiction. You know, as I've said, I worked in the utility industry, and I probably should have been a managing director by now, at 50 years of age, had I taken the opportunities I was supposed to. If I hadn't been so caught up in drink, I probably would have been more successful. So there is an element of you've got to do everything today because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bit that, unless you've been in addiction, an active addiction, you don't really get that bit because tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
I think that's the bit for me that was so important, that at any stage of my recovery, I could mess up. At any stage of my recovery, the grace that I'd been granted could be taken back. So it had to be, for me, it was the now mentality is still something I have. I have to look at myself and my role and work and make sure I don't push that on others, because it's not always great for people. Some people, some things you do need to take your time with.
Yeah.
Some things you do need to step back and go, this needs more time. This isn't ready. I didn't have that in me at the time. I couldn't wait.
Of course, yeah.
It had to be done.
Yeah. So you did the 3,100 miles. How long did it take then?
So I arrived on the start line on May 20th, 2013. And I'd given myself 100 days, 30 miles a day, and planned to finish on August 27, 2013.
So isn't that a marathon a day then?
More than a marathon a day.
Jesus.
30 miles a day for 100 days.
I just made a comment earlier about doing 10 to 11 a month now.
Yeah.
Doing one a day.
So the stats are pretty crazy. So if you do the stats, I had 5 days off because it's 5 days, I think, was generous enough. 5 days and 100 days. So I did 122 marathons and 95 days of running.
Fucking
So that's what it equates to.
It's hurting my head just thinking about the physical toll that would have on the human body.
It was. It's when I look back on it, it's taken me a long time to look back on it and go, do you know what? That was absolutely phenomenal.
I couldn't even run for a fucking bus. Do you know what I mean? I'd probably just wait for the next one.
I'm the same now. I can run a bath now. It literally is. But when I look back on it, it was something that I had in my head that if you planned it correctly, if you thought about it correctly, then 30 miles a day is doable. And it was doable. But
just goes to show the difference in our mentality there, though. You're saying that's doable. I'm just like, not a chance.
I think when you've had experience of running those distances and you research it and you speak to the people who have done things like this before, so like called Rory Coleman. I spent a lot of time talking to Rory. Rory Coleman ran from London to Lisbon. He spoke to the guys who had done these sorts of things. And it's a mindset of, it's your job.
Yeah.
That's what you do every day. You get up, you put your running kit on, you go and run. You don't have to worry about anything else, you just run. But it doesn't stop you questioning things. So, I ran through California, got into Nevada, and we hit the loneliest road. So Nevada is the Highway 50 we chose. And the reason I chose the Highway 50 so soon after leaving California, San Francisco, first of all, when I left California or San Francisco, I was lost after 6 miles. I forgot to mention that bit. Completely lost. With all these maps done on electronic devices, and then realised I didn't have any access to, Wi-Fi or data or anything like that, because things have changed even since 2013. Data's so much more widely available. The phone that I had didn't have any data on it. It was a nightmare. I had to have Wi-Fi connection to get the maps. The little laptop we had was rubbish.
I can just see you running now with a sheet of paper in front of you trying to work it out.
I've got it tattooed in the back of my arm now. East. Just move east. Yeah. And that was a conscious decision. So, and again, it's a great metaphor for addiction. There are times, so I knew that if I moved east, I would get to where I needed to be. There are sometimes you have to go north. And sometimes you have to go south. And sometimes you have to retrace your steps. Relapse. Sometimes you have to go back, start again. You never have to go back right to the start. You have to maybe retrace your steps a little bit. But if you head east and you pick that direction, you'll get to your destination. So I realised that fairly quickly. So in a petrol station, buy a map and just find the road that took me east. And we just followed it. Now we knew we had to go on the Highway 50, which was the loneliest road in America. And the reason we chose that was, by the time you leave California, and anyone who's in addiction and going into recovery will know this, you have 2 weeks and everyone thinks you're brilliant. Oh, you've sobered up, phenomenal. Oh, you've stopped taking drugs, that's great. So proud of you. And then 2 weeks later, they get on with their life. Yeah. And you're sat there like, what about me? Everyone's forgot about me. And I knew that that's how America was going to go. I left San Francisco, went through California, all the Facebook messages were coming in, phenomenal, Tom, it's great, blah, blah, blah. And then by the time I hit Nevada, it stopped. That messaging had all stopped because people go back to their jobs, they go back to their day-to-day lives, and they forget about what you're going through. So the Highway 50 was my way of saying it's a lonely road. Time magazine described it as the loneliest road in America. There's 4 towns in 450 miles through the Great Basin. 16 mountain passes, all above 7,000 feet. So you've got altitude to deal with, you've got 40-degree heat, and you've got complete isolation. And I'm on that road and I'm thinking, what am I doing? And I have great faith, and I prayed every day. And the good thing about praying in the desert is you can pray like I'm talking to you now. You know, you can just go, hey up God, how you doing? Because everyone knows God's from Yorkshire. So it's like, hey up God, how you doing? And have a bit of crack with God.
Now then,
hey up lad, are you all right? Have a bit of crack with him. And this one particular day, I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? I've had enough of this. This is doing my head in. I've got sore knees. I've got sunburnt the day before. I miss my family. I was just really annoyed. It was red hot. So as I'm running down the road, I turned around and went, right, okay. I don't know what you've got planned for me, God, but have I not suffered enough? I've sobered up. I've run across the Sahara Desert for you. I've spoke to hundreds of thousands of kids. I've done all this sort of stuff. I preach about sobriety to everyone I meet. Have I not suffered enough? And of course, anyone who prays to God knows he doesn't answer you. You know, and I'm thinking, okay, right, whatever you've got planned for me, I trust you. I've got faith. I said my end of my prayers and moved on. And as I'm moving on, a motorbike came up, Harley Davidson rider. Now, I'm not going to do the accent for the Harley Davidson rider because I'm rubbish at American accents. So we'll pretend he was a Yorkshireman. He got off the bike and went, hey up, how you doing? He got off the motorbike and he went, how are you doing? I said, I'm all right. He says, have you got water? Yes, I've got water. Have you got some food? Yes, I've got food. And have you got a place to stay tonight? Yes, I've got a place to stay tonight. I was getting quite annoyed with him. Yeah, I've got a place to stay tonight. And he got back in his motorbike and he looked round at me and he went, good, I'm just making sure you've got what you need. And he rode off. And I looked up to the heavens. I went, really? I'm Harley Davidson rider. No chance of an ice cream, God. But the point of that was so powerful to me.
Yeah.
I alluded to it earlier on when the celebrities do these challenges. They have a Winnebago. They have a sports masseuse. They have a doctor. They have hotels. They have everything laid on for them. I wanted all that. I wanted the Winnebago. I wanted the sports masseuse. I wanted 20 pairs of trainers to choose from every day. What I needed was food, water and shelter. And it was a great warning or a great thing for me to say, right, okay, Tom, if you focus on what you need, you'll get what you want. If you focus on what you want, you'll never get what you need. So for me, that was a very powerful interaction with a Harley Davidson rider on that road, the loneliest road. And on that road, for me, was such a spiritual experience. Anybody who's been an addict, anyone who's in recovery will know how solitary that life can be. You feel like you're the only one. You feel like nobody's looking out for you.
Yeah.
And for me, it was so powerful that, the motorbike rider was there helping me out. And about another 100 miles down the road, there was a cowboy.
Yeah.
Just a cowboy, a random cowboy. So what's he doing here? So I'm looking after me cattle. He says, my farm's 300 miles that way. But I'm the local pastor. You what? The local pastor in this area? He says, there's not a church for 500 miles. He says, no, it's 300 miles away. So I'm the local pastor. And he asked me, he says, have you got the Lord Jesus Christ in your life? Now, you've got to picture the scene. An ultra runner who looks dishevelled, a guy with a white hat on a white horse asking me about Jesus Christ. I went, yes, I have got him in my life, yeah. And he got down off his horse and he put his hands on my shoulders and he prayed for me. Yeah. And it was like the most phenomenal, powerful experience I've ever experienced. And it kind of just set me off on this path of, this is guided. You know, there's somebody else looking out for you. You know, we ask for that all the time in our recovery. Is somebody actually looking out for you? Now, this isn't a God thing. For me, this is a spiritual thing. You know, I got it further on when I was in Utah going through the mountains, and I actually felt like the mountains were saying to me, it's okay. We've got you. You know, listen to us. Follow our path. We've been here for thousands of millions of years. You're just a tiny little speck. But if you trust us, you're going to be all right. And I got that really powerful experience quite a few times, especially in the mountains. You know, we talk about the Native Americans and they talk about how they listen to land. And I could see, and anyone who's doing anything, spend some time in solitude. Because I only had my brother with me. And my cousin was there for a little bit and a friend of mine. But most of the time it was just me and my youngest brother. He was driving the support vehicle. So I didn't speak to anyone all day, literally. Didn't see anyone, didn't talk to anyone apart from my brother. So solitude was so powerful in that whole experience. By the time I'd got to Colorado, halfway there, you think to yourself, do you know what? I'm not too sure, you know, I can do this. You know, I was way behind the schedule. I'd been trying to do the 30 miles a day every day. Some days it was 28. Some days it was 27.
And does that make a massive difference as well? When it doesn't sound like much, does it? Do you know, just being a couple of miles off, but I'm sure
it does, yeah. Especially when you add in the 5 days of rest days. So it was starting to chip away at it. I got to the halfway point. I said, okay, it's half time. Let's have a half-time team talk. If we continue doing what we're doing, we're not going to finish.
Yeah.
We're not going to finish in time. So we need to make sure we change the plan.
Yeah.
So I changed my diet to what I could. I changed the mileage, how I was running the mileage. I'd run more at night when it was a bit cooler. And I tried to change things around. And for me, that seemed to work. We started to bring things back around. We started to realise that, yeah, it's okay to change the plan. It's okay to be in a position where you can say, this isn't working. And again, I try to relate everything back to my addiction.
Yeah.
You know, when things don't work out, it's very easy for you to throw your hands in the air and say, I'll go back to what I know. You know, when things have happened in my life since, would be very easy for me to throw my hands in the air and say, you know, my brother died in 2020 from a drug overdose. It would have been very easy for me to throw my hands in the air and go, I'm never going to do this. I'm going to go back to what I know, which is alcohol. But the America run taught me that you can change the plan.
Yeah.
You don't have to follow it. It's not linear. You can change the plan. We changed the plan in Colorado and started to alter how we were doing things and started to bring the plan back on track.
Yeah. So you mentioned then about your brother. I've got a quote here as well. It says, 11 years ago, I stood ready to run across the United States of America. I was raising awareness about addiction and recovery. I probably did it in the hope that my brother Adrian would gain strength from it. He didn't and died from an overdose in 2020. I'm sorry I didn't try harder, brother. Can you, or do you, take responsibility for somebody else's addiction?
It's a great question. And the truthful answer is yes, I do. Me personally, I do.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
I've always been so my brother especially, God bless you, Adrian, he idolised me as a young lad. So my dad died when I was 13, and he'd have been 5, maybe 6 at the time. Might have been a little bit older, but 5 or 6. I took on the dad role. I took on the dad role really badly because I was a 13-year-old boy.
Of course, yeah.
I did it really badly. I did everything wrong. I was too hard on him. I was physical. I was relentless in pushing him. But then I was also a bad role model because I had started drinking at 13. So, of course, he followed. He followed drinking. He followed doing that sort of stuff. But he didn't follow the sobriety. And I couldn't make him follow the sobriety. And we know, I know this, you can't make anyone do anything. I think that's why it's really important to have this conversation, is that not everybody gets it. Not everybody gets there. And we have to be aware that people are dying from this. People die from our illness. People die from our condition. People die from our actions. And Adrian was one of them. He couldn't get it, but I did blame myself for... He died in 2020, and I had a proper breakdown after his inquest. When I heard that, I think I'd chosen not to listen to how deeply involved in drugs he was. I think I'd chosen not to know about his heroin use, his crack use.
For what reason? Does it come from the idea that you blame yourself for it in some way?
I think it was so hard for me to get to a point where I'd lost so much connection with him. Yeah. That he'd been so far lost that there didn't appear to be any way back for him at the time. And I know that, I'm still a firm believer, while there's breath, there's hope. And I always hope that one day, and our relationship for the last year of his life was really good. Compared to what it had been. Yeah. Because it had been, in our adulthood, it was fairly volatile. Even in my sobriety, he was fairly antagonistic about me. Didn't like the fact that I was sober. Thought that I was lording it up above him. Yeah. I was better than him, and it was never that way.
No, but it's quite easy for that to happen, isn't it? I suppose, yeah. For people to think, you think you're better than me because you've done X, Y, and Z.
You've forgotten where you've come from.
Exactly,
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I definitely hadn't forgotten where I came from. I knew that I was one bad day away from being back where he was. But I did blame myself, and I blame myself so much in that year after Adrian died. I kind of lost myself. Yeah. Lost who I was as a person. Lot of self-loathing. Lot of emotion of why couldn't I save him? I think every addict's like that. Why can't we save them all? And I came to the conclusion that Adrian is exactly where Adrian needs to be. Yeah. His life was led the way he needed to lead it. He couldn't have led it any other way. That was just his way. Which is tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Did he saw you obviously finish this massive challenge that you'd taken on. That was done in a way to, like you say, inspire all these people that have gone through so much, especially in regards to addiction. Did he ever say that he felt inspired by you? No. Did you ever? No?
Never. No. Never. And I think that's...
Because of all the people, I feel like in this journey, of all the people that you're trying to reach, as well as talking to your past self of what can be achieved, I imagine a massive part of this as well was to reach out to your brother and to tell him 100%. What can be achieved. So it must be quite heartbreaking to have gone through everything that you've gone through, to challenge that stigma, to get that message out there, and it not get to the one person that you wanted it to get to.
100%. Yeah, it's been a real blot on my copybook, as it were. But I have to remember, and I have to keep remembering this, that not everybody gets it.
Yeah.
And I have to remember the people that did become inspired by this, that have continued to be inspired by going out and running across a continent. And that was brought...
I'm inspired by it now, hearing the story for the first time. I'm just sat here going, like, wow, what an incredible feat.
Here's the one thing that I remember in Colorado. No, it wasn't. It was Pennsylvania. I have to remember my states.
It's going to so many places in such a short space of time.
Pennsylvania, by the time I'd got to the end, I was about 10 days out, and I'd had enough. I'd given up on myself, really. I was like, I didn't want to be anywhere near running across America.
Yeah.
I'd done 90 days on the road. And I went into a cafe in Pennsylvania, and this woman was talking to me. I said, "What are you doing? You look like," by that stage, I looked like Forrest Gump with the big beard. And I went, I'm running across America, raising awareness about recovery from addiction. I dismissed her. And she went, "You need to speak to the guy that runs the cafe." I haven't got time. Too busy. Things to do.
Miles to run.
Bring me my breakfast and leave me alone. It's quite rude to her.
Yeah.
It was early in the morning, and bear in mind,
I can't imagine you being the happiest, go-luckiest person taking on this challenge.
By this stage, my cortisone injection had worn off. My knee was in bits. I was in a lot of pain. Anyway, she brought the breakfast, and she says, "You need to go and speak to the guy behind the counter." She says, "All right, yeah. Let me get my pancakes down. Get me pancakes and my syrup." By that stage, I was a convert to pancakes and syrup and bacon. Because when I first turned out there, syrup on your bacon, no chance. By the time I'd finished,
big believer in it. You've got to do it first.
Syrup on my coffee. Syrup on everything. And eventually, I felt a bit brighter. I said, "Okay, I'll go and see him." And I walked into this kitchen where this guy's preparing all the breakfasts. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm running across America, raising awareness about recovery from addiction." And I said it that dull. And he burst out into tears. Yeah. And as he burst out into tears, it was almost as though somebody had given me a punch in the stomach. "Wake up, Tom. Wake up." And I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "My son has just died from a heroin overdose."
Wow.
And he's left 4 children behind. He says, "Those 4 children are in a village where the people won't speak to them because their dad was a junkie." And they've stopped speaking to the kids. So by this stage, my eyes are filled up. I'm in tears. I'm getting angry. And I said to him, "Make sure you go home tonight and tell those 4 children their dad did nothing wrong. Make sure you go home and tell those 4 children that there's a man out here that's run across an entire continent to try and change people's perspectives on addiction, on people like their father. That people like their father haven't died in vain." And this guy just came over to me and gave me the biggest hug. And we shared tears, but it was tears of joy then, because he almost had hope. And for me, that was the most powerful moment of the run. It was a reminder to me not to give up on this. There are days in the addiction world and the recovery world where you will feel like you're giving up. What is the point? When you see more addicts coming through the door, when you see this world in a mess, you almost think, what can we do? One person at a time. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
We can help one person at a time, whether it's by sharing a story, whether it's by listening to them, whether it's by being in their company, whether it's by attending an appointment, whether it's by just giving them another chance. One person at a time.
Yeah.
And if we continue to do that, people like those children in America will know that their father didn't die in vain. I will know that my brother didn't die in vain.
Yeah.
My sister didn't die in vain. That my father didn't die in vain. Because that's how addiction's affected me. Those 3 people.
Yeah.
Just in my life. As well as friends and along the way. But we can't give up hope. We've got to continue to remember that by every step on this journey we take, whether it's running across America, whether it's just walking across Hull, if there's a person you see that needs to have a listening ear or needs to have some words of wisdom, give them to them.
Yeah.
Share them. The worst thing we can do in this world is to go through the world without sharing our experiences, without sharing our knowledge, without sharing who we are as individuals. I'm an addict. There's no way of getting away from that. I am an alcoholic in recovery. 17 years I've been walking this path. I will never change that. I'm proud to be in recovery. I'm proud to be an alcoholic in recovery because I have so much experience that I can share with those out there who haven't seen that yet because of the stigma attached to it, because people are too scared to talk about things. I'm proud that I can walk this path.
You've spoken before about wanting to create a national sobriety day and using what you've done to promote awareness and reduce that stigma around addiction. How do you see events like this helping individuals and communities affected by addiction?
So I take great inspiration from gay pride. One of the most powerful days of my calendar is walking into Leeds in August for gay pride. And I get really emotional. I get a big well up of emotion. My daughter just goes, "Oh, hey, Dad's crying again." And it's so powerful for me. Yeah. So I grew up in a generation where being gay was wrong. Right? I grew up in that generation of men and women who were told to keep quiet because of their sexuality. And now we can have gay pride, where we can walk through Leeds. People can walk through Leeds. My daughter, who's lesbian, can walk through Leeds proud of who she is, with no stigma attached. Yes, there are some idiots that we have to deal with still. And you're going to get that throughout society. There are always going to be so, but we're better than we were in the 80s. I would love to see a day where we can walk through Leeds or Manchester or Liverpool as a community of addicts, either in recovery or still active, but still saying we exist, we live amongst you, we are proud of who we are, and we should be recognised as a community. Instead of walking through the shadows, which we still are. Don't get me wrong, it's phenomenal. This podcast, for example, does phenomenal stuff to get us out of the shadows. But there are still people who would love to see us stay in the shadows. That would love to see us not come out, not spoil their party. The alcohol industry would probably love us to stay in the shadows. You know what I mean? They would probably love us to stay down. But I would love to be in a position where we can march through Leeds for one day a year. And I know we have certain sobriety recovery marches. For me,
the difference with the sobriety recovery marches, though, is we held the recovery walk here in Hull last year, but that was the first time and probably the last time that it's going to be here. So those people who are in recovery, who maybe have felt shame and the stigma, they've done it once. And if they want to do it again, they're going to have to travel a ridiculous amount of miles to be part of that event. But there is something about doing it locally in your own town every year, like Pride do. Pride have, events. It's not just one Pride event per year, is it? It's many Pride events all across the country. That's where, just to reiterate what you're saying. Yes, there are those things out there, but they're so few and far between, aren't they? Yeah,
it's getting the people higher up to get behind a National Day of Sobriety, if you want to call it that. Whatever you decide to do. But for me, a National Day of Sobriety can mean, it doesn't have to mean alcohol, it can mean sobriety from anything. And we can have a day where we can say to the communities that we live in, not only are we here, but we're active. And we're actively putting back into the communities. We're actively supporting those that you've ostracised for years. We're actively back giving support and love and listening to people who have been marginalised for too long. We're probably the most marginalised community in the country, the recovery community. The way drug addicts and alcoholics are treated is still archaic, in my opinion. And I have to state, this is just my opinion. It's not, it's not anyone else. It's, for me, I think we're so marginalised, it's unbelievable. So a National Day of Sobriety, for me, we have to take power from the Pride community, power from that LGBTQ plus community, that they have stepped up despite being beaten down, despite being persecuted, sent to prison. Well, who else has been sent to prison? Who else has been persecuted? If you go into our prison system and look at our jails, alcohol and drugs are probably the biggest driver for that. and we're not to get too political here.
No, of course.
But we're criminalising the health problem.
Yeah.
And for me, that's we need to get rid of that.
Do you think there has been improvements on that? I mean, I feel like I've kind of seen, bear in mind, when I first started working in this sector, I was part of a criminal justice only service, and now it's a community-based service, and I think the criminal justice arm of it is a very small percentage of it. Do you think that has gotten better then, rather than seeing it as a criminal issue but seeing it as a health issue from your experience of it all?
I think we're still miles off where we need to be.
Yeah.
I think when you speak to the police and you listen to how they still perceive it, I still think it's dealt with as a criminal issue. And we're getting better.
Yeah.
We are getting better, and it's slowly. We are getting better. But I still think we've a long way to go before we get to a point where we're treating people for trauma.
Yeah.
We're treating people with health problems. I think trauma is a word that we need to deal with more. How many of people who are, we talk immigration, some of these people are fleeing some of the most traumatic events in modern times, and we've ignored that. We're ignoring the fact that so many of our young people have grown up in poverty over austerity years, where services have been cut back, their parents have been struggling to keep them fed. That's trauma. Yeah. We need to understand the word trauma is not what we originally perceived it to be. It doesn't have to be World War II. A child's trauma can lead to so many other things, and I think we need to deal with that.
Do you know, it's funny you should say that, because even I think the one thing that I never really understood as a trauma, similar to what you just said there, I related trauma to things like, partaking in say the war in Afghanistan and things like that, something of that level. But so many people who struggle around the time of Christmas because they had really awful Christmas days growing up, that in itself is a trauma.
Yeah.
Do you know, and just waking up to nothing and parents being under the influence and them being forgotten about at a time when so much of it is about, you see it on TV of giving and the magic of Christmas and kids waking up to like that in itself. When you start talking to people, it's like, wow, I think I just underestimated how traumatic it was to just, be someone who lived in those circumstances.
I think that word trauma needs to be looked at in more depth.
Yeah,
it's how you perceive, it's how you've received that Christmas day, how you've experienced it. We often have this conversation about, well, they all grew up in the same family. How are they all so different? Well, they're the same parents. Well, they didn't have the same parents. And let's be right about this. If you grew up in a family of 5, which I did, my mum and dad were very different to my youngest brother than they were to my oldest sister, because they had different years of experience, different life experience. So whether we, as parents, we try to say this, all of them all the same. No, we don't. We just don't. Because the children experience us differently at different times in our lives. And I think that's really important, that we have to remember that it's how you experience something. I could say something to you now and you've experienced it as I've said it and as I've meant it. Somebody listening to this podcast will go, do you know what, I've heard that completely different.
Yeah.
And if this listened to be 10,000 people, there'll be 10,000 people will hear it differently from their own experience.
Well, that's it. It's looking at ourselves as individuals, everyone that we ever meet will experience us in different ways as well.
Yeah.
Like, nobody will ever know me kind of like how I know myself.
That's right.
Your perception of me will be completely different to, say, Robbie's perception of me, or, Mike in the other room there. They'll all see me differently.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Going back to, as you said then, growing up in a house, different circumstances. I've got one daughter. Because I've got one daughter, I can afford to do lots of things with that child. If I have 2, 3 kids, money's going to be a bit tighter.
That's right.
The third child along there, for instance, is going to have a completely different experience to the 100%. First child, just based on the fact that I can't afford the same things for 3 children as I could for 1 child.
That's right.
So it's a really interesting point that I've never actually thought about. But yeah, you're completely right there. Yeah. Everyone's going to have that really different experience in the family. And talking about your family, specifically about, you mentioned, obviously we talked about your brother Adrian. You mentioned your sister as well. All had problems with addiction. Where do you think that comes from? Because you made the joke earlier about being Irish, going to the doctor, and it's like, of course you're Irish. Is there something in there that you see the disease, in quotations, of addiction as a hereditary thing that was passed on from your parents? Or do you think it was the social environment in which you've grown up in? Explain to me how you think that addiction developed for yourself,
for me,
and for your siblings as well, really, on the topic of it.
For us, it's definitely environment. Mm-hmm. Environment is very important in any growth of any addiction. And for us, so we were chucking along nicely in the north of Ireland, lovely, going away. Now, things were tough. Dad wasn't exactly the best at times. He struggled with his mental health. He struggled with substance misuse. Lost his job. I had to work for 4 years. Then we moved to England. And moving to England was a disaster. Absolute disaster.
For what reason?
Well, I explain it to people. I didn't want to come to England because I'd heard strange things about the English. I'd heard you were all like the devil. Like 2 horns and you want to kill us. Well, equally, what I didn't realise was that you didn't like us. Certainly when I came to Wakefield. Being tied to a tree and beaten with sticks and laughed about, any time a bomb went off, blame the paddy kid. Any time a teacher asked a question, I answered with my funny accent, I laughed at, I punched. Being an Irish kid in the 80s in England, in Wakefield specifically, was a tough place to be. I experienced it really tough. I lost my voice. I couldn't speak. I was this streetwise Belfast kid who'd come over here knowing how life worked, and then all of a sudden I couldn't speak. Didn't want to speak because of my stupid accent. And it destroyed us as a family. And then my dad died. So my dad went to bed one night after having a bottle of whiskey. He never drunk. All right. So my dad only drank 1 bottle of whiskey in his life. My dad had other issues. And he choked to death at 39 years of age. 5 children, 1 bottle of whiskey. The trauma that left behind of losing your father suddenly like that, just in such extreme circumstances, obliterated us as a family. It absolutely, it was like somebody had thrown a hand grenade into our family and blown us all to bits. Yeah. My mother gave up on us for a few years. She'd lost a husband of 19 years, a father of 5 kids, sat in his big armchair all day crying and eating food. She got better, but she was focused on my 2 little brothers. I was left more or less to be the man of the house. Yeah. As I saw it, she never actually said that to me. She never said be the man of the house. And my sisters were the same. My sister who passed in 2022, she found my dad. She found him. At 14 years of age, walked into her dad's bedroom and found him dead on the bed. Her life was never the same again. It was never the same again. My brother Adrian was dad's complete favourite. And again, everyone, nobody else favourite. Adrian was his favourite, 100% his favourite. Adrian would get away with everything. And he became mum's favourite. So that whole over-mothering, all that sort of stuff, destroyed Adrian eventually. So that those 2 instances of moving from Ireland to England and my dad dying, where they created a perfect environment for addiction to grow. Yeah. Where in Wakefield as well, where drinking culture, the Westgate Run, was very prevalent. I fell straight into it because I realised as soon as I started drinking, I could talk. Nobody laughed at my accent. Actually, the girls loved my accent. So as a 13-year-old boy with drinking me, it was like all my dreams had been answered. This thing called alcohol was my saviour. Adrian probably felt the same. And Sinead definitely felt the same after a difficult marriage. She had severe mental health issues after finding Delhi, and struggled all her life with alcohol and drugs, prescription medication. So I think it's the environment for me, rather than it being a hereditary. Yeah, I think environment is massive. Poverty helps, helps it grow, and trauma. Yeah, and trauma for us was our father going to bed one night, 39 years of age, and choking to death.
It's a real mixing pot there of things that I think even now talking about it, I guess the interesting thing when I do this podcast is when you hear people's stories like that, you think, Christ, if I'd experienced that, I'd probably have a problem with substances myself, because it's very easy, when we go back to the stigma of it, I think it's very easy for people to judge people with addiction problems, whether it be alcohol or drugs, who have had a really good upbringing, really good relationship, parents are still married, nice family home. And I think just try and put yourself in someone else's shoes. This is the whole reason why I do this podcast, is I want people to hear other people's stories and just think, actually, if I experience a fraction of that, maybe I'd be struggling with these things as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why it's so important to have these conversations and to hear these stories.
100%, because we don't know what people are going through or have been through. And I've met some people who have grown up in very nice houses but have still struggled with addiction. Because what we see as very nice houses possibly has been lacking in love. Or possibly been lacking in something else that they haven't been getting. So it's how you experience that environment.
The experience is what we're coming back to, isn't it? I guess.
So everyone's experience of that environment is completely different. Yeah. I also know people who grew up in my sort of circumstances who didn't turn around to addiction, didn't go to addiction. So it's how you've experienced it and how you find your escape from the pain. For some people, it's work. They throw themselves into a career and they work their way through the pain. Yeah. For me, it was drink. And the pain doesn't go away. I think that's really important to say as well. I'm 17 years in recovery, and I still struggle with it. I still struggle with the pain of childhood, the pain of loss, sudden loss, especially after the loss recently of my brother, my sister, and my mum. My mother died last November, just a year gone. And losing those three people in my life in such a short space of time triggered back the sudden death of my father from 30 odd years ago. So we have to deal with this again, of how it affected me as a child. And I went and did therapy for a year. Yeah. It was brilliant. Being able to go back to that little boy who was lost and being able to say to him, you're all right. You can cope with this. You've been through this before. It's going to be painful, but you can cope. And being kind to that little boy. And I think I was kind. And I'm now in a position a year later for my mum's passing, probably the strongest I've been mentally for many years, certainly since Adrian died. And I think it's always to remind yourself that this journey of recovery isn't linear.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not just going to be once you sober up, it's going to be a straight path to freedom. It's not. You're going to have problems. You're going to have issues. You're going to have difficulties along the road. And it's understanding that you have another way of dealing with it other than your substance. So for me, therapy, writing, talking, all those sorts of things for me are so important, because I don't run anymore because my knees are done.
Of course, yeah.
But I go to the gym 5 times a week, try and make sure I do something physical. I write almost daily. And I talk to my partner about everything I'm feeling, and she talks to me about everything she's feeling. That's not that makes it sound like we're a couple of right whingers, but we're not. You know what I mean?
Sometimes I get it. Yeah.
Do you know what? I don't feel right cracking today. I'm like, what's going on? And it's not that she's become my counsellor, because that's really unhealthy. Yeah. It's just that we listen. Just sometimes you just need somebody to listen to.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not a case of they're expecting a solution to it or anything. It's just nice to say things that are on your mind, get things off your chest, and even that can be, a really healthy thing. Going back to, we've kind of, come back to this in a bit of a roundabout way, but what was the feeling like after completing the 3,100 miles then?
Again, I'll be as truthful as I can. It was horrendous. So I got to the finish line, and there was 4 people at the finish line. So there was 2 friends from England who lived in America, my brother and another person from America. So you have this thing in your head that you're going to run through New York and there's going to be a ticker tape parade. Yeah, you know what I mean? There's going to be this big fanfare. There's going to be TV cameras and you're going to be rolling down like Rocky and all these kids are going to be following you through the streets in New York. Yeah. And there's 4 people at the finish line. And I was and I think that was perfect because that's exactly how addiction's treated. Yeah. It's like, nobody cares. Yeah. I know we do.
No, I get it.
I know we do, but in the general world, nobody cares. It was great to get some of the messages back home, but even when I came back home again, the first person from Wakefield to have run across the United States of America, thought there'd be a big thing about it. Page 34 of the Wakefield Express. You know what I mean? Page 34 of the Wakefield Express. They even got the story wrong. They didn't even send the journalist out. They just did it over the phone and got all the states wrong. Yeah. Got the mileage wrong. Got everything wrong. Yeah. Did a big full-page spread in the centre of it for the people who were doing the Great North Run. Yeah. But little old Tom had run 3,000 miles across a continent. Yeah. Page 34. I'm still bitter about that.
Yeah, do you know what? No, and rightly so. And right, because everything, the story that you've told me today, I'm sat here thinking, wow, what a great movie this would make.
Yeah, but I was so frustrated that I didn't get to more people, that I didn't get this message out to more people. And this is why I'm doing things like this today, 10 years down the track, because I want to get this message to more people that when you do finally decide that today's the day I'm going to recover, there's so many opportunities for you, so many opportunities for you to take. And if you take your opportunities, that'll feed your potential. Your potential didn't go away. You were born with potential. Every one of us is born with the same amount of potential. The difference is some of us have better opportunities. And what I've realized is if I take my opportunities, I will feed my potential. And that's the message that I was so annoyed about not getting out to more people when I finished that run. Page 34, Wakefield Express. I haven't bought it since.
No. But yeah, that's it. I'd do the same thing. I guess there is something there. Like, had you known that there wasn't going to be the big fanfare, had you known that it was going to get page 34 in the Wakefield Gazette or whatever it's called, would you have taken on the challenge?
Yes.
You'd still have done that?
I'd still have done it because it was so important to not let that side of me take over. Because that's ego.
Yeah, but I think when you're doing something like this, ego has to come into it in some respects. I don't think you'd take on a challenge like this without it wanting to feed your ego a little bit. Because now you meet someone, and all the only note I had about yourself today was in recovery and had ran 3,100 miles across addiction. I was like, fucking sold. Do you know what I mean? Can't wait to talk to him. Yeah. That in itself, I guess you could, not that you'd introduce yourself as that, but that's something that you have about yourself, which I think is absolutely incredible.
I think for a few years it was a bit of an embarrassment.
Really?
Yeah, a bit of an embarrassment.
For what reason?
I became that person who'd run across America.
Okay, yeah.
And there was so much more to it. Yeah. It wasn't just about running across America. I wanted the conversation to be about addiction, about recovery, about sobriety. Yeah. That's why I've called the book It's Not About the Beard. So I did write a book 2015 and I called it It's Not About the Beard because when I came back telling people the story, all they were interested in was, do you condition your beard? How long's your beard going to go? How often do you trim it? And I got really annoyed one day and I went, it's not about the fucking beard. But the guy that was publishing the book wouldn't go for it. It's not about the beard. Yeah. So
I'd have preferred that. And if I saw that on a shelf, I'd be like, I'll pick that up.
It's Lance Armstrong's was It's Not About the Bike.
Okay, yeah.
So for me, it's not about the beard. Yeah. And for me, that was so important that we tried to continue to share that message. That it was so much more than a beard or so much more than running across America. It was about passion, it was about love, it was about family, it was about recovery, it was about addiction, it was about death, it was about everything that goes with. It was more than just running across America.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've alluded to the Forrest Gump thing already. And one of the things my producer told me was, don't mention Forrest Gump. Now, you mentioned it before I did. And I guess with that, though, I get why he said that. Is because it does diminish the achievement of what you've done. And it does put the highlight on something else. And I imagine when you talk about that shame of going up to people and that being your story, and them talking about the beard, oh yeah, I ran 3,100 miles across America. Oh, like Forrest Gump?
Yeah.
No, not like Forrest fucking Gump, because he's a fictional character. And I did it for this reason.
Yeah, the difference between me and Forrest Gump was I'm real.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It is frustrating.
Yeah.
It is, but I'll be honest with you. Even if you don't mention Forrest Gump, if you say to someone you've run 3,100 miles, the stock answer I get at the minute is, I do parkrun. Or I've run London Marathon. And that's great.
Yeah.
It's lovely. But people can't comprehend what 3,100 miles is.
No. Well, it was
really
in my
struggle.
head working out when, like I said, the comment of the 10, 11 marathons a year. And then when you said about the actual...
So a good way of doing it, for when I speak to students in schools, 3,100 miles from Hull would get you to Iraq.
Oh, God, my head.
All right? So it would get you to a little bit into Iraq.
Yeah.
So from here to Istanbul is about 2,500 miles.
Yeah.
So another 500 miles takes you into Iraq and all that sort of place. So when we talk about America, people don't fully comprehend
the size
of it.
Yeah.
The Atlantic Ocean's only 2,000 miles wide. Yeah. And I've done 3,100. So it was about trying to...
That sounds more impressive if you say you've ran the length of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes,
and it's
right.
it's much smaller as well. Yeah.
I did try, and I was trying to row the Atlantic Ocean many years ago, but I couldn't raise the funds. I couldn't buy the boat. So, so there's things like when I'm telling the story to people and the Forrest Gump analogy comes up, I laugh at it now. I'm looking forward to maybe another 10 years still telling the story because it's still got as much power.
Yeah, absolutely.
10 or 11 years down the track now, and it's still got as much power now. I can't wait till there's grandkids around.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to tell the story to grandkids. And they'll go, go and ask your granddad about running across the United States of America. The Sahara Desert on its own was tough.
Yeah.
So you speak to people who've done the Marathon Disables. So to have that on your running CV, for me, I'm immensely proud as a person in recovery to have been able to do something like that, to show people that we are worth investing in. That is the thing.
Do you know what's crazy? I think had you done that run now, you would have much more profile than you did. You made the comment earlier about you couldn't even get data in most places in America. With the way the world is now, with TikTok reels and all that, and influence. I mean, one of the things that when you talked about the ultramarathon running, I thought about David Goggins, and as someone that you're probably aware of. But what you're doing now sounds like, or what you did do, sounds like much more of an accomplishment than I think I've ever heard anyone do. So it's incredible that it's not a more well-known story out there.
I think again, there's a couple of things. It's the time that social media wasn't. I mean, I've got a McDonald's tattoo on the back of my arm. This is my sobriety tattoo. I've my Run Across America tattoo. And I've got a McDonald's logo tattoo in the back of my arm because I knew that if I saw the McDonald's logo, I could get Wi-Fi. Yeah. It wasn't about the food, although I did eat loads of McDonald's as well. It was about Wi-Fi. Yeah. And I could get data. And I was able to upload to Facebook. So Facebook was all we had, really. Instagram wasn't a thing, and Twitter. Facebook and Twitter were the two things that I did as much as I could. But the stigma attached to addiction, and I'll keep coming back to that, had I been running for my dead granny's cancer or my mum's cancer, I'd have raised £1 million.
You'd been on Lorraine and everything.
I'd have been all over the news. But because we're doing it for people who apparently choose to destroy themselves, and that stigma attached, and that's the bit that I'm still so passionate about. We need to change that perception of who we are as people. If you invest in us, if you take the time to listen to our story, if you help us deal with our trauma, if you help us deal with our substance misuse, we can be good individuals who will contribute to society. And none of us should be given up on.
Absolutely, yeah. No, Tom, it's been an incredible conversation. I like to end all our podcasts with a series of questions unrelated to what we've spoke about today in honour and memory of James Lipton. So my first question for you is, what's your favourite word?
Serendipity.
Least favourite word?
Trigger.
Tell me something that excites you.
Oh, what a great question. What excites me? My children's future.
Tell me something that doesn't excite you.
Old age.
What sound or noise do you love?
You know that shopping sound when you buy something on with Apple Pay? I love that.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Dogs barking at 6 a.m.
What's your favourite swear word?
Oh, am I allowed to say
You
it?
Absolutely.
It's got to be it's got to be a cunt. You know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that online.
Of course you are. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
MP.
What profession would you not like to do?
Judge.
And lastly, you've talked a lot about your faith. What would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I hope so.
Thank you so much for coming on Believe in People, Tom. This has been an incredible conversation to have. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And if you've enjoyed this episode of the Believe in People podcast, we'd love for you to share it with others who might find it meaningful. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and leaving a review will help us reach more people and continue challenging stigma around addiction and recovery. For additional resources, insights and updates, explore the links in this episode description. And to learn more about our mission and hear more incredible stories, you can visit us directly at believeinpeoplepodcast.com.